if we can go to an advertiser and say we're an official content partner of the NFL, it just makes it that much easier to sell to these brands. The amount of inbound we had from every single other major professional league, conferences, it was just really, really validating in a lot of ways.
A lot of people say the secret to success is who you know. But for Adam White, the secret to success isn't just who you know, but who other people know you. And that's not just about major partnerships like the NFL, it's also about the investors he works with.
What better validation than have someone who used to run one of the largest media companies in the world, one of the most successful media companies in the world, say, I'm investing in these guys.
Over the last 11 years, he's turned front office sports into one of the fastest growing brands in the market. It's been named Adweek's hottest in sports twice, and it's been featured in the Inc. 5,000 fastest growing private companies in America in both 2023 and 2025. He even managed to speed up that growth during COVID, that time when no sports were even airing. In this episode, Adam shares the networking playbook that helped him break into the big leagues, the numbers that prove that it worked, and how he outplayed old school media titans. I'm Harry Morton, and this is Moneywise, a podcast not about how to get rich, but for founders already in the grind looking to take it to the next level. It's made for the private community of high net worth founders over at joinhampton.com, which means in every episode we get deep and vulnerable about the finances, the emotional journey, and all of the unique experiences that the only other people that are going to understand fully are other founders themselves who are either in the trenches or on the other side. If that community sounds interesting to you, by the way, and you're a founder doing at least 3 million in revenue, you should go and check it out at joinhampton.com. Okay, I've started by name dropping one of those big partnerships, the NFL, and in a bit we'll talk about exactly how that's impacted his business. But names are one thing and numbers are another, arguably more important. So let's get the rundown of front office sports revenue journey from the beginning in 2014 to today.
We started out at basically zero. And then, our first year was like roughly $1 million. And then COVID, we still grew. I don't know. It was like, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it was probably closer to 2 million or something like that. Like we still grew during COVID, which was cool. And then we went from like that to like 6. And then, Redbird comes in and we go from like that to like 10. Mm-hmm. And, now we're on pace this year to finish, probably directionally close to 20, depending on how things shake out over the last couple of months.
With what kind of margins? Like, I don't understand. I don't know media. Tell me about the margins on that.
Yeah. It depends on the business unit and the business line. On pure media, you're looking at margins that are anywhere between let's call it 85 to 95%. Custom content, you're looking at margins that are anywhere from 60 to 70%. Events, you're looking at margins that are anywhere from, first year events are probably like 30% to second or third year events where the margins are more like 40, 50%. And then you have some other stuff, whether it's production or performance or some other things. So I think you're talking about a blended margin. If you're doing it right, anywhere between 70% to let's call it 80 on the very high end is probably where you want to sit.
$0 in 2014. That's where we'll start this story. Not because I want to give you every granular detail about the journey, by the way, but because this whole intentional and meaningful connection strategy wasn't some growth hack that Adam and his team developed along the way. It's been the game right from the start, before he even realized what he was doing.
It did start as a college project at the University of Miami. I went and studied sports administration after our freshman year, or at the end of our freshman year. We were supposed to essentially do informational interviews with people who worked in sports. So I chose the athletic director at Miami, and I went back home to Phoenix, where I'm from, and was playing baseball at night and working out in the morning. And so, our professors at Miami, we were all about, it's not all about what you know, it's about who you know. I think obviously it's a mix of both. And so I was like, well, if it is about who you know, and I want to make sure I get a job by the time I graduate, what happens if I just do more of these informational interviews and just publish them online? As we all know, people love talking about themselves and what they're doing, and it's so much easier for you to not only get time, but meaningful time if I'm saying, hey, I'm Adam, and I want to tell your story, versus, hey, I'm Adam and I want to pick your brain. I just leaned into that and did 110 informational interviews in the first year. I, published it on Wix. I built the website myself. I like to joke with people that it was dark mode before dark mode, because it was a black website with white text. And it's funny because the original name that I was thinking about was Executive Report, because it was like, that's what it was supposed to be about, is just, executives in sports. And for some reason, as I talked about it with my dad and just, throwing ideas around and everything like that, it was like, what about front office sports? It's so funny to think back and now be like, the business, I don't think would have worked if it was Executive Report.
Do you truly think that it wouldn't be as big as it is today, were it for the fact that it were called something different?
I do. I mean, I think like brands, like as much as I think there's so many different brands out there today. I think it truly does matter, right? Like in a lot of ways, like Executive Report, if we would have still called it that one, I don't even think we've got funding for a variety of reasons, because that would have been the single focus for it. Whereas like front office sports, it allows you to do so much, right? The New York Times is the New York Times, and you can do New York Times style, you can do fashion, you can, anything that's in their orbit. They've done a great job. And obviously, again, Bloomberg and you name like one of the big mainstream publications, they've done really good jobs of basically taking a hierarchy or whatever it is and then being able to, or let's call it a hero brand, and then being able to build underneath it. Again, I didn't know it at the time, but thinking about it today, and like front office sports sounds cool, it looks cool, the three letters, it adds a little bit of dimension that
it's so
wouldn't
interesting
have had
because
previously.
It's so interesting. Everyone seems to have a different view of it. Like some people are like, the brand doesn't matter, whatever. Like it's all about product and product market fit. And if you've got the right thing for the right people at the right time, call it whatever. And then other people are like, no, brand is like everything. It's so super interesting.
I've spoken to people in the past, and it's like everything we do is just like brand forward, especially when you're a new brand, right? Like I think legacy brands can, get away with being able to kind of rest on the legacy brand. But if you're new, like, and especially in a space like where we are in media, where we're not selling a physical product for the most part. I mean, we sell sweatshirts and hoodies and hats and things like that, but our business isn't like selling cars. We're selling trust. We're selling access. We're selling, insight, information in a way. Like we're selling an audience to brands, and it's like those brands have to be able to trust our brand and what the brand stands for. And so I think like that is the big part about this, specifically from a media standpoint. It's like brand is almost everything, right? Again, you go back to some of these other things. You think about the Wall Street Journal. It's like, wow, that brand is really something that either I aspire to read or I want to be featured in because of what it stands for, in capitalism in New York and, whatever. And similarly for some people with the Times or Bloomberg, right? Like they have a level of, let's call it in today's modern term, aura, that I think is important, right? There's like Forbes, people obviously rag on it for a variety of reasons, but it still matters because of what Forbes stands for and Forbes means. And so I just think that, again, like brand really is so important. And I oftentimes think it gets underinvested in.
For Adam, there are two ways to create a valuable and attractive brand aura. One, make a quality and trustworthy product, as you should. And two, be associated with other brand auras that validate your own. And it's not just because it convinces other people to trust you. It's also because it convinces you to trust you.
I got the benefit of the fact that throughout those interviews and while I was in college doing all this stuff, I basically just did, market research for 4 years. And so, we had launched this awards program that we still have. It's called Rising 25. We launched it in 2017. I remember the first people who won it thought it was fake. I mean, it wasn't. I had just built a relationship with some people, and, somehow I convinced Anheuser-Busch to be the presenting partner of it the third year. I was like, if we can do that, we can sell anyone. I'm like, this is Anheuser-Busch. Like, we can get anyone involved. And so I think that was like a big turning moment from a commercial standpoint. I think we've had some opportunities, early on from an editorial standpoint where we broke like real stories, like real news. I mean, the first like really big story that we broke was the AAF, which was the Alliance of American Football. It was a startup spring football league here in the States, and it had filed for bankruptcy. and no one had known about it, but I had a source who, knew about it and kind of, told me through and showed me through. And it's this thing called PACER, which is a legal document thing, and anyone who covers courts and stuff like that knows how to do it. But me, as not a journalist or anything like that, had no idea. So they took me through it all and showed me, and we tweeted it out. We broke the news, cited by pretty much anyone and everyone you can think about, and it was like that moment where we even had real reporters reach out to the account and be like, "Oh, I've seen what you guys are doing. Would love to talk." And like one of our longest tenured reporters is literally someone who just DM'd us and said, "Seen what you're doing and would love to find a way to work together." And so we hired him, and he's still here 5 years later.
At this point, Front Office Sports is building a reputable brand and growing quickly. And thanks to an accidentally viral tweet, that growth was about to speed up even more.
I'm not like an emotional tweeter, right? If you went to my Twitter now, most of it is just like every once in a while a tweet, but it's mostly just sharing the stuff that our team is doing. I posted at the time, it's amazing what can happen in a year, rather innocuous, right? I think it just, at the time, the girl who I was dating broke up with me, or I broke up with her, I can't remember, whatever it was. I just tweeted it out. Again, non-emotionally, but like that was like kind of like a random one for me. And this same guy named Jason Stein, he saw that tweet and sent it to me in a DM and was like, let me know how I can help. So we got on a call, and then I kind of, finessed my way into meeting with him in June that year. We spoke in April on the phone. And then, he told me while we were there that he was, leaving the business that he had started. He'd already sold it. He was at the end of his kind of 3 or 4 year earnout. And he said, we should find a way to work together. And I said, okay. By October of 2018, they were investing in the business. They invested $750,000 for 51% of the business.
What was the kind of revenue figures when you took that investment?
It was barely anything, right? Like it was just like a dream, right? I mean, we had a couple $100,000, right? But it was like, we had an audience, and we knew based on all the informational interviews that we had done that if we did these things that there would be an audience, right? And so, the business did that first year after investment, we went from basically like no revenue to essentially $1 million, which was great. Like, I mean, we knew it, and it was awesome. But this is, for me, again, like I've always told myself, my first thing, not my last thing. Maybe it'll be my last thing because, I love it and I'll ride it out. But, that's what gave me solace in being able to say, okay, like, maybe I'll give up a little bit more of the business and things like that to find a true partner who believes in us and will be invested in the long term. And I think that is, relatively accretive and why to the point of where we are today, we are because we had someone who was a true partner from day one, not just someone who was like a, small minority investor. We always kind of went into it from a partnership approach versus like an investor approach. And I think that's kind of the reason why we've been able to weather a lot of the, kind of things and horror stories that you see out there, whether it's investors or, trying to grow too fast or things like that, just because, we've always had partners who have as much, if not more, stake in the game than we do. And I think that's helped us, be able to kind of make sure all things are aligned.
Can you talk me through the sort of the journey in terms of audience size?
Early on, the business, was mostly social. And then as we hired people, it became mostly newsletter and still growing on the social side of things. At this point, we have a million and a half, almost 2 million cross-platform followers. It's grown over time, pretty linearly as we've added new products and everything like that. But the business has, originally, I can't even remember. We probably had a couple thousand newsletter subscribers when we got investment. Now we're up to probably 750,000, 800,000, which is great on our flagship newsletter. A lot of that growth came during COVID, just because of the fact that, COVID was terrible from a business perspective, but was great from an audience perspective because we were covering all the stuff that was happening off the field. And so there was nothing at that time happening on the field. All the conversation was around the bubble, NBA bubble. Will they play sports? Will sports be back? This, that, and the other. And so I think that's been like really, relatively accretive to us in the sense that like, we were able to funnel a lot of audience to the platform and that's, let's call it 12 to 24 months in 2021, even though that the advertising business and all of that stuff was really tough. Everything has just kind of continued to increase. Every reporter you add theoretically is going to add more traffic to the website, right? And then every social person you hire is going to theoretically give you more opportunity to create more content that's going to create more impressions. Like, it is pretty one-to-one, right? Alongside of that is the quality still has to remain incredibly high, right? Like, I think specifically nowadays from a media standpoint, like, if you're not original, distinct, differentiated in some way, shape, or form, you're just not going to break through, because the time of being able to ride, search algorithms, and you've seen a lot of media companies who built their businesses around search and platforms and stuff like that. They never really built brands that resonated, again, with their audience or had direct relationships with their audience. And so they're trying to go back now and do that at a time where they don't have all the traffic and they don't have all of the things. And so they're trying to basically do it in reverse, where I think you're starting to see a lot of the partners and brands that invested in original reporting, invested in these things that make them, a place that people come to, a destination, are starting to, really, let's call it, separate.
So, if COVID was sort of like the beginning of like a growth time for you, mm-hmm. or a notable growth time, and obviously it's been linear, but like if that was like a bit of a starting point for like this to really become, build momentum, how did you figure out monetization of this audience?
A lot of trial and error, I think. I think it took us a while. We knew that, newsletters at the time were hot. Obviously, the Morning Brew guys did a great job with that. Sam and the Hustle guys and gals did a great job at that. So, I think that's where we started. And then, over time, the monetization has shifted as we've grown audience and other platforms. And especially as we've positioned the business to be more of an enterprise news organization, where we're going after, a larger audience. Our conversations with major brands has changed a lot. And most of those brands, are looking more for 360 degrees of opportunity, whether it's events, media, audio, digital, social, display, newsletters, right? Newsletters used to be, 80 or 90% of our business. Now it's probably like 30% of our business, but that's actually a good thing, because our business is obviously much larger and the diversification of the revenue streams is much healthier versus it being solely on one thing. And now you look at our social business is probably 30% of our business. Our newsletter business is 25, 30, based on wherever the last kind of quarter fleshed out. Our events business is, 20%. And we, again, I remember a couple months ago, we kind of do our monthly all hands with the team, and we pulled up a chart, and it's like, here's where we were a year ago and here's where we are now. And the difference was just so staggering in that mix from a revenue standpoint.
Up to this point, we've been talking about investors and partnerships like they're two separate things. And they are really. The Bush deal and the NFL one, which we'll talk about shortly, are revenue plays. But there's a really interesting thing about the way that Adam has approached growing the business, and I want to spend a few minutes on that here. Everything he does is rooted in intention and buy-in. And that philosophy doesn't just show up in how he runs the company, it shows up in how he chooses investors too. I'll let him explain.
The early investor was ST Holdings, and they invested in the business in 19 or 18, but really, kind of 19, whatever. Coming out of COVID, and what was it? I think 21, maybe 22. Cranes invested in the business a small amount. This is the other thing too, is like, I think just being real with your investors and real with your partners, in the sense of like, I think they quickly found out and we quickly found out that they were buyers, not investors, which is fine. But, again, like it didn't make sense to then have them on the cap table if they weren't going to be as strategic as we or they thought they could be. And so, then in 23, I just happened to strike up a relationship with Jeff Zucker, who's the former chair of CNN and CEO of CNN, obviously NBCU and a few other places. And, I told him what we were doing, and he said, look, if you want to do this, what you're saying you're doing, you should do it with me. This is what I have going on with Redbird IMI, which was his new investment vehicle, which was a joint venture between himself and International Media Investments, which is, an Abu Dhabi-based, media company. And I said, okay, sounds good. And I went back to our investors at Crane and SC, and I said, hey, look, specifically from a Crane standpoint, as I said, look, I know you guys, probably are interested in getting your money back plus a premium. I said, I can do that right now for you. And they were totally on board. And so I think that's the other thing too, is just like, I have so many conversations with other entrepreneurs and people who are backed by, investors and things like that. And I just think so many of them are not willing to, nor have a desire to provide necessary solutions for their investors, depending on, where it is in the cycle or whatever it is. And then they just feel stuck. And then they're like, well, I've raised at such a huge round and I can't do this and I can't do that. And it's like, well, you can do things, but you just have to be able to have those conversations with them. I think it's just being able to be frank and have good relationships with them, to where it's like the ultimate solve. And I think sometimes people forget about this, but the ultimate solve and the ultimate win for investors is not only making their money back, but making money. So if you can put them in any situation where that's going to be the case, there is going to be an appetite for that conversation. Sure, maybe some cases they'll say, well, I want more or whatever it is, but I think like that's something that just always has to be in the back of people's minds. At the end of the day, especially depending on what your capital structure looks like your job and the role that you sit in as a CEO is meant to return capital to your investors. And you just got to know that. And, luckily I've had really good, again, partners and investors who have worked with us when we found solutions and things like that made sense. And I think we would have obviously continued to grow with the Crane people again, for a variety of reasons, but I think they knew at the time, and we knew at the time, that we probably weren't going to grow at the same level we have with people who are truly invested in thinking about growth with the business and making sure that all of that stuff happened.
What changed when this round, it seems from what you just answered, it's given me an idea of it. Can you just give me a sense of what changed with this new round of investors?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was professionalization, sophistication. They came in with a whole team of analysts who helped, right? It was that, and it was confidence. I started the business when we got our first investor when I was 23. Yeah. They came in and I'm 29, and I've been running the business, for 6 years, and I know what's working and I know what's not working. And so it's just I think that is honestly, it's just confidence, the ability to bring in a level of sophistication and professionalization, and just opening up the opportunity that we had with them, just given their Rolodex and their partnership. Sure. And it was more about validation too, right? We're trying to build a media company, and, again, this is a media company, and then we have investors, and eventually it gets hopefully bought by potentially another media company. So what better validation than have someone who used to run one of the largest media companies in the world, one of the most successful media companies in the world, say, I'm investing in these guys.
So they've got a big name in broadcast media fully on board, giving them serious credibility as a legit outlet. And you know what pairs perfectly with that? One of the biggest sports organizations in the world validating them as sports experts. Yes, we're now talking about the NFL partnership, or about to. Before that, I just want to remind you of the absolutely killer place to find a ton of connection and opportunities, just like the ones that have been so crucial for Adam in his business. You know it, it's Hampton, the community of high net worth founders who this podcast is made for. And speaking of great connections, the reason I'm even hosting this podcast at all, and why my company makes it, is because Sam Parr reached out to the community to find potential partners for a show he wanted to make. I sent him a message, and the rest is history. But the community isn't just great for making these kinds of connections. It's also great for getting incredible advice from other founders at all stages of their business that you just can't get anywhere else. Also, last thing on Hampton, and I promise we'll get back to Adam, there's no better way to build honest and meaningful connections with anyone than in person, which is why Hampton has local chapters with in-person meetups, events across the world for all the members, and a ton of in real life opportunities. If you're a founder doing at least $3 million in revenue, definitely go and check it out at joinhampton.com. And now, the NFL deal.
We are the number one business of sports publisher in globally. That's just an undisputable fact from an audience standpoint. And I think, the NFL is smart and savvy in the fact that they know where their holes are in their audience. And so they've been, over the course of the last, let's call it 24 months. So women, Gen Z, they have deals with other publishers in those categories. And they had kind of approached us and said, hey, look, like off the field is like really a high interest for our audience. We have a lot of access and opportunity, and we think there could be something here. So, 3 or 4 months of back and forth conversations, negotiations, and, now we're an official content partner of the league, which means we have access to Mark's IP and access to a major event specifically around international games and the Super Bowl, as well as the draft. And then we have the ability to then commercialize that. So we can go to market and say, hey, XYZ brand, you're already a partner of the NFL. Well, we're an official partner too, and you guys, if you spend money with us, we'll be able to leverage those IP and that mark. So, the team marks, the league marks, a stadium, stuff like that. And it's been massive. I mean, my whole focus right now is really how do we continue to bring down the friction for our sales team, right? Like if we can go to an advertiser and say we're an official content partner of the NFL, it just makes it that much easier to sell to these brands. And so, it's been, the amount of inbound we had from every single other major professional league, conferences, it was just really, really validating in a lot of ways, and commercially has already paid for itself, in 2 short months. And so, hopefully the idea is, can we replicate that with every other major league or governing body or what have you, and be able to kind of go to market in 26 or whatever and say, hey, brands, if you're spending in sports, wherever you're spending, we have a content partnership with those leagues, and we have the ability to tap into IP and marks.
It seems to me that the trend here, one thing that I've spotted, you seem to be very good at like getting yourself into the right room.
Yeah.
Like, I'd just love to know, like, what's your secret there? Like, how do you replicate? How could someone take this away and replicate that? Because it seems to me that like knowing the right people, making those meetings happen, getting their trust, building that relationship is like what's led to a lot of these big unlocks for you.
Totally. I go back to one of the conversations that one of the people I interviewed a long time ago, and it's always stuck with me. He was always just like, be a fountain, not a drain. Like in relationships, like you don't want to be the person who always asks for tickets or always asks for something. So I also think like that's been huge, is just, you just keep things top of mind. I've always told our team, soft touch points lead to hard touch points. Right. So the more soft touch points that you can share with someone, whether you see something cool and you just send them a text, or you send them an email and say, hey, this, or take a screenshot. Like sometimes I'll just be in our elevator and like one of our partners' stuff will come up, and I'll just take a screenshot of their ad that's not even running on our platform, and I'll just send it to them. Be like, oh, thinking of you. Like, and it's just like stuff like that really adds up to where people just don't feel like all you're doing is being transactional. And then I think the other thing too is like you just can't be afraid to shoot your shot. Like the reason why I met Jeff and our current investor group is like I originally had seen some reporting on the guy who used to be the editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal, who's now the executive editor of the Washington Post. And I'd seen some reporting that he was potentially on his way out as someone who's trying to build the Wall Street Journal of Sports. I was like, oh, interesting. Shot him a note on LinkedIn. Yeah, whatever. I said, hey, look, this is what we're trying to do. Would love to chat if you're interested. No pressure, whatever. He responded. He said, sure, let's chat. And one day he's like, yeah, I would love to really introduce you to a media investor. And, I wasn't looking for anything, but I'll always take the conversation. I was like, sure. He's like, okay, I'm going to introduce you to Jeff Zucker. And I was like, oh, okay, like the media investor. That's cool. And, and then Jeff and I had coffee, and the rest is the last 2 years. And so I think it's like stuff like that where you just can't, you have to be in the right rooms. Then when you're in the right rooms, you just have to build real relationships. I think so much of it is people have just made things so transactional. And it truly is like such a long game. Like that was like a year, I think, maybe a little less than a year of him and I having meetings, going back and forth, staying in touch, sending notes when we saw stuff. Oh, this was cool. Thought this was interesting, blah, blah, blah. And then just randomly it happened to all work out. And you have to start doing things before you need it. I think that's the other thing too. Yeah. It's like just build relationships when you don't need anything. And like that like is a huge unlock as you start to like have these conversations when there's no pressure.
Talk to me about your personal journey. Like you've started as like a 22-year-old kid through to
19. Yeah, started when I was 19.
Okay, and are you 30 yet? You're still young.
31, just turned 31.
You're 31. Okay, you're an old man. Okay, fine. So you managed to get to 31. But like that's you've had to grow a lot as a CEO during that period, right? Like that's been a pretty intense change from being just like a kid interviewing some people on a podcast to like, okay, now I'm running like a 70-person organization. Can you identify anything that's been like the biggest shift that you've had to make, something that's really felt the most challenging or for you in particular?
I think one thing that was pertinent that one of my other founder friends told me is like, sometimes you have to sit back and realize like it's for you, it's your company, but for everyone else, it's just another company. And you have to take that into consideration. You know, you want everyone to feel like what you do about the business, but it's just no matter who they are, it's a bit of a challenge. And so I think like being able to level with that and like adjust my management to associate with that and like being able to, it's just, I think the biggest challenge is continuing to be able to say, okay, how do we make sure we have the highest standards possible? All of our quality is best in class, all of these things, with being able to kind of let go from being so involved in all of that. I think that's like been a big change, and letting managers manage, I think, has been, something that you have to learn. Because again, like I spent no time, and this is again different for me maybe, but I spent zero time in any other business. This is the only thing I know.
Sure.
I know. Yeah. I had a couple internships, right? But like I never worked in a company. I never worked with HR. You know what I mean? Yeah. So this has all been trial by fire. Read as much as you can on the internet, learn, take in pieces of advice where you can, and hope that it works out. And for so far so good.
So far so good.
Yeah, it's been a 10-year journey for sure.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, and I think there's kind of an interesting advantage to not being influenced by having worked somewhere else and seeing how it's done. You kind of get to make your own rules. So we talked about the financial journey of the business. Talk to me about your personal financial journey. Have you had an opportunity to realize some liquidity? Like you're building a really solid business here, and this is Moneywise, where we talk about money. What about your side?
Over time, there's been like small amounts that I've been able to recognize, which is good. My mom was my first editor in chief for a very long time, which was cool. And so last Christmas, my gift to her was a new car. That was kind of cool.
Nice.
That was awesome. a kind of like awesome moment. I had student debt for a long time. So last year I was able to pay that off, and my now wife, then girlfriend, was always like, you can't propose to me until you pay off your student debt. And so, which, is I totally fair. And we've been together for 7 years, so she's been on the journey, which I think is also an important part. Like, I don't think enough people talk about just like having a supportive partner and all of this stuff, because we spent zero time together. Like she would come over and I would be sitting there working, and she would just be like hanging out on the bed, like just chilling and talking and stuff like that. And like, I think that's an incredibly important part about all of this too, is just like the success that comes from being able to have people around you who are also, mutually invested in that. And so, so those are like the two big things. Outside of that, it's been like, I always told people like, this was never supposed to be a business. Yeah. Anything that comes of it is amazing. Like I'm playing with house money. Like if I went into this thinking like, oh, I want to be rich or something like that.
Sure.
Okay, it would have probably been a different mindset, but this is just like, I want to have a job. I want to have fun. Yeah. And like all of these things are that. So, I think those have been the nice things, is like, it creates a level of less, like, I wouldn't say like stress. Like obviously there's still tons of stress, but from a financial stress standpoint, like being able to pay off all the credit card debt that I incurred trying to build the business, and being able to pay off the student loan debt that I paid, like that stuff, and starting from that process, I think has just, and it's helped in just even how I think about managing the business, right? It's just like everything doesn't feel so life or death anymore, which is nice. But no, I haven't had some grand exit or incredible secondary or anything
right. So
like
my
that.
next question for you is like, Do you have any personal net worth goals? Like, is there something you're shooting towards here?
I think maybe, again, it's different and maybe it sounds crazy, but it's never been the driver, right? I didn't grow up with any of it. It's a long answer and a short answer, but no, I don't think so. I think, again, like I mentioned, I'm just playing with house money in some way, shape, or form. I think for me, it's about freedom, right? Like, in being able to, whatever comes from it, does it allow me to, be able to choose what it is that I want? Because at least in my opinion, I think eventually there's levels of diminishing returns. Like, again, this is just me. I know it's not other people, but like, how big of a house do you really need, right? Like, I want a house that's just comfortable for me and my family, right? Like, I don't need fucking 15 bedrooms and 5 of which I'll never ever go in or whatever it is like that. Maybe I'll change that mindset, but like, I think for me and all of that stuff, it's never been about that, and it's just been about building something that I really enjoy doing and I really like, and then hopefully eventually the positive impacts of that will be meaningful, but like, it doesn't have to be something where it's like, I need to be worth $1 billion.
What drives you? What gets you out of bed to come and sit in the CEO seat every day?
I tell people, I'm like, I have 65 people plus investors. Like, there's just a lot of people that depend on you. So I'm like, I don't really need anything to get up and other than that, right? Like, that to me is motivation in itself. Is that, like, I think about it, like, people are paying for kids' mortgages, people are paying for schools, people are paying for their own apartments. Like, that's all I need.
You don't want to be like the Rupert Murdoch of sports. It's like, that's not the mission here.
No, again, like, if it happens, it happens. That's never been, right? Like, it's just always been about, like, how do you do something that's cool, that's fun, that you like to do? And again, like, I told myself, like, you're going to be working for 30, 40 years of your life. Might as well enjoy it, right? And so, I think for me, it was like, that's been the big stuff, right? I know the show's called Moneywise, and maybe that's a contrarian take to the Moneywise side of things, but that's what I've been chasing and what I've been following. And like, again, like, the other stuff is like competition, right? Like, that's what, like, it's exciting.
Yeah.
Like, business is sports in a lot of ways, right? And it's like, I don't play competitive sports anymore. I swam and I played baseball and stuff like that. So this is like that next level of competition that, like, that's what is fun about it, right? Winning is fun. Like, having a brand that matters is fun, right? Like, that's the stuff where it's like, if I boil it down to, is like, the things that really move you is like, those are the things that move you.
This episode's been all about intentional branding, valuable connections, and instilling trust. But there's other ways to build fun connections, like buying a private jet and handing out rides to touring musicians. Yeah, Chuck Yates, he was a guest on this show who also isn't driven by the numbers, but enjoying the journey for him has looked very different indeed. It also included losing $130 million. So if you want to hear that story, click here.